Dr. Brette Garner at Denver University. She's going to be talking to us about best practice. Brette is a former middle school teacher and is a self-proclaimed, what was the phrase?
Professional nerd.
Professional nerd who enjoys puzzles and games and such. And so we're super excited to have her share a really kind of thoughtful and I think timely conversation about what are the best practices and for whom. So Brette.
Thank you so much, Paul. Hi, everyone. As Paul said, my name is Brette Garner, and I'm at the University of Denver. I'm an assistant professor there. And today I want to talk about going beyond the best practices to use pedagogical judgment in these really uncertain times. Things have not been normal for a while, and maybe that is our new normal. But really, we're asking teachers to do a whole lot, and often to do more with less. And so I want to talk with you all today about how do you navigate that? How do you deal with that? And how do you stay true to yourself and to who you are as a human while we're going through this weirdness? So just one spoiler alert to start. This is not going to be a tips and tricks session. There are so many people who are telling teachers what they should be doing right now. You do not need me to layer onto that. Okay, so I don't have all the answers, though that would be really nice. I don't. So to tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from, I'm a former middle school math teacher. I taught grades 6 through 8 in Houston, Texas. And while I was teaching, I started to wonder, are we doing it wrong? I was in a pretty traditional set of schools in Houston, and I was really concerned that so many people, my students, but also just adults and friends and family that I knew, could get around saying, I'm just not a math person, right? And somehow it's okay to go through school, to go through K-12 and college and all of that, and to come through on the other side and say, I'm not a math person. You can go to a restaurant and say hey, could you split the bill for me? Can you, or tell me how much to tip? I'm just not really a math person. I don't do math. That's okay, right? People do that. But if you walked into the same restaurant with the same friends and said, hey, could you tell me what's on the menu? I'm just not a reading person. I don't really read ever. That would be weird, right? And so we've created a system where somehow it's okay for a lot of people to come through and say, I'm not a math person. To me, that says that it's not so much a problem with the people. It's not half of people are just not math people and they don't have some math gene or something. It's a problem with the way that we're teaching. If we're teaching in a way that is not working for our students and not helping them recognize their own mathematical strengths and skills, then that's a systemic issue. That's not an individual issue. And so now I am a teacher educator at the University of Denver. I work with pre-service elementary teachers, as well as secondary teachers. I also do research and work with a lot of in-service teachers, both in rural and urban areas. And really, in my mind, in my career, I've made teacher learning the key. We know a lot about how to teach math well, and we know how to teach math in a way that helps kids become math people, but we don't know a lot about how to help teachers do that. We don't have systems in place that support teachers' continued learning and development throughout the course of a career. And so I'm going to share with you today some stuff that I've learned from a pair of projects called Project Sigma, which is featured in that book, and that stands for Supporting Instructional Growth in Mathematics. Our follow-up study is called Project Tau, Teaching Amidst Uncertainty. We named both of these in the before times, so we weren't planning on naming projects after what could become COVID variants. We thought, oh, this is cute and mathy and Sigma and Tau and math things, but also Greek letters, and yeah, it was cute. And then now maybe they'll become variants. I don't know. I hope not. Maybe we can just stick with Omicron forever, and then it'll just go away and fizzle out. We also named Project Tau in the before times, not thinking about or not knowing, not expecting just how uncertain everything would become, 2020 and after. So And of course, all of this that I'm telling you about, these are not just my ideas. I don't do this work in isolation. I work with a team of really lovely and thoughtful humans and scholars and researchers and teachers who are featured here. And this work is funded by the National Science Foundation. All right, so back to the main topic. What are some best practices for teaching elementary math? Like when you think of the phrase best practices, what sort of stuff comes to mind? As you think about that, I want you to turn and talk to your neighbors about what kinds of best practices you have in mind. Take another 30 seconds or so to wrap up your conversations. Y'all are such good students. Okay, so we only needed 15 seconds. That's fine. So I want to hear from you all. What are some of the best practices that come to mind for teaching math? What are some of the things you were talking about? Oh, wait, sorry. We've got a microphone for our Zoom friends. It doesn't sound weird in here. It just helps them hear better.
Okay, okay, good. I feel better about that then. We were discussing the idea of students processing mathematics and not just being fast at things, and honoring their time and what they bring to that process.
Absolutely, for sure. What else? What are some other best practices?
We sit over here that or Sherry says she starts every day with, you can do this. Mm-hmm. You're smart, you can do this. So the positive reinforcement, the positive energy that you bring in at your small group or your whole group or whatever. Like, yeah, that's not starting right in with math, but you got to start your brain.
Yeah. So. Well, and you have to feel confident, right? And like help students know that they can do it and you believe in them.
Yeah, I can share some ideas from the online group. So from the online group, making connections, student-centered, lessons that are engaging and allow students to interact with the math and different ways to get the answer. Small group instruction were some of the ideas we were generating.
Totally. I think I saw a hand in the back. Did I? I saw a hand up here with John. So. Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't really talk about it with you guys, but anything that's like culturally responsive, anything that accounts for and considers your students and their own cultural practices.
Yeah,
is best
absolutely. Yeah. Students need to see themselves reflected in your classroom. They also need windows into other people's lives and to understand and appreciate other people in your classroom as well. And like all of these are great things that we want to do. I'm not saying that like none of these are bad ideas. These are all right answers, right? But it's a little more complicated than just what's the best practice, because we have to decide what is best for our students on this day, in this moment, in this interaction. And so we might say like, okay, best practice is give students time to think deeply. We need to give them time to like really grapple with the concepts of mathematics so that it's not about speed and accuracy. Really want to get into it and let them engage in rich tasks and productively struggle. But we also know we can't give them too much time, because if we give them too much time, then they might start to get frustrated and like be a little unproductively struggling, and then they get frustrated and give up, or they might just like wander into some non-mathematical activity, which isn't always a bad thing, right? Like, whomst among us has not been like you're supposed to talk about one thing and then the conversation like wanders off into some other territory. That's totally fine. But if students think that they have like infinite time to work on something, then they're not really trying to get anything done, and then it's just, yeah, we'll hang out in this unmathematical area for maybe a little too long. But we also, we got to give them time, but not too much time. But then we also have to think about covering all the material and getting through the curriculum or the pacing guide maybe staying on pace with your colleagues, keeping up with whatever district assessments are coming down the pipeline. So we also have to like think about the coverage like in a long-term sense. So we have a little bit of room to like decide how much time to spend, but we don't have like all day or all year. As another example, we know that it's best practice to let students productively struggle. Like there should be some grappling, some like figuring stuff out. And they should be able to like figure it out for themselves because we know that they can do it and we know that they're mathematicians and they need to like experience that problem solving process. But we don't want them to struggle too much. We have to give them some supports and scaffolds, right, so that things stay in their zone of proximal development and all of that. Like we want to help them make sure that they actually can do it and so it doesn't become an unproductive struggle. But we also can't proceduralize everything and just say, oh, well, here are the 5 steps to solving this problem, and if you just do these 5 steps, like, it'll all work, because then they don't actually get to do the struggle part. And so there's teaching is complicated. We have all of these, or there are plenty of best practices that give like conflicting advice. And so it's not just following a set of tips and tricks, but really thinking like, what is good for whom, when, and why? There are some choices in teaching that are always going to be wrong, right? Like being mean to kids, belittling kids, refusing to use kids like correct names, or like learn how to pronounce them. Those are wrong, pretty much always. But there are very few choices that are always going to be right in every moment, every time. And sometimes the best practice rhetoric ends up feeling kind of like clickbait. Like, oh, here's this one weird trick. Or if you just just avoid the #1 worst carb, then like whatever the carb analog is for teachers, right? If you just avoid the one worst carb, you'll be a great teacher. Or there's this, big secret that your principals don't want you to know. And if you just do this secret, then the kids will learn and everything will be great. It ends up being like a sort of clickbait or like listicle sort of thing that you might see on BuzzFeed of like, oh, if you can just do these 5 or 10 or 85 things, then you'll be a great teacher. That's not really how it works. I don't think that we can boil teaching down. Like, I don't think we can boil good teaching down to a set of discrete practices that are just like, well, if you check off all these boxes, you're an amazing teacher. Teaching depends on interactions between a complex set of humans, between all of like the human children in your room every day and like who you are and how you all show up to the classroom every day. All of the strengths and personalities and ideas and concerns and anxieties, all of the stuff that you bring to the room every day. Teaching is an interaction across all of that. It's complicated. And it requires professional and pedagogical judgment to do it well. It cannot be boiled down to a set of discrete practices or steps. On the flip side of that, like the other, the kind of darker side of the clickbait version of best practices is that we get this baggage of the binary. And a lot of teachers, I know myself included, like I consider myself a recovering perfectionist. A lot of teachers were perfectionists, right? We want to do what's right for the kids. We want to do the best we can every day. And like as a teacher, I can go home at night and think, oh man, I really should have followed up on what that student said. Or I have a much better answer for that question now, like when I'm falling asleep at night than I did in the moment. I can remember every like negative teaching evaluation comment that I've gotten. I don't remember, and that's like, a few. I don't remember all of the really great like positive ones. They're like, oh, this class was wonderful. I remember every negative one, right? And like I see some nods, like teachers are often perfectionists. We want to do the best that we can. And if we frame teaching practices as either good or bad, like there are good practices and bad practices, then the implication of that is that teachers are also good or bad. Like there are good teachers and there are bad teachers. And I want to like push us away from this binary view of teaching. And to elaborate on that a little bit more, a binary view of teaching is a very evaluative stance. Good practices, bad practices, good teachers, bad teachers. I want to push us towards a more expansive view of teaching, where it's an interpretive stance on what good teaching is. It's not just like what's good or bad, but what goals does this practice support? What goals are not supported? In the moment, you have to decide, like, am I going to follow up on that student's question? Am I going to give a few more minutes to work together? Am I going to move on? Am I going to like return to this idea tomorrow? Or am I going to like just wrap it up and tell them the punchline at the end of the math block and then move on to something else? We have to make all of those decisions. And we have to think about like what goals are being supported and what goals are not being supported. To elaborate on this a bit more, the binary view of teaching would say that good teaching can be broken down into like specific practices or curriculum or other activities that will result in student learning. An expansive view that would say that, well, actually research suggests that some practices are generally better than others. Like they're generally productive for student learning. But teachers have to exercise professional and pedagogical judgment to figure out how to apply those to your own classroom and to your students. Binary view of teaching would say that good teaching is about the individual, about your skills and knowledge and expertise and practices. But good teaching is relational, right? You can be a really great teacher for this class, like at this time point, and then if you go to another school across town or go to another grade level, or just get a different mix of humans in the room, it can feel really different, and you might not feel like a good teacher. Good teaching is relational. It's about how the teachers, like your skills and knowledge, but also how you're responding to your students who may be more or less receptive to actually learning. And so it's not about like good or bad, but it's about relating to the humans that you're with. Binary view of teaching would also say that good teachers always have good lessons. The flip side, of course, being that if you have a bad lesson, you must be a bad teacher. But lessons are interactional, again, right? And as teachers, we design experiences, and some of it might go the way that we want, and sometimes it might not. And if things don't go the way that you wanted, you don't get to all of the goals that you wanted to achieve, that doesn't make you a bad teacher. It makes you human. Okay, so now what? What do we do? Well, I want to tell you the story of Lizette McLaughlin, who is a student name for one of the teachers in our study, is featured in the book. I want to tell you the story of her learning. And I picked her in particular because she really illustrates the problems around dealing with the baggage of the binary. If I were to ask, like, what's a good teacher? Lizette would check off basically every box on that checklist. She is an experienced teacher. She's teaching high school math at a school that we call Fermat. She's really thoughtful, really caring, like really loves her students, knows them and respects them, has great relationships with them. And it's just like a really happy class. She also has a really strong commitment to letting students do the mathematical thinking. So she has a really hard time telling students like, yes, that's right, here's what you do next. She wants to get them to figure it out and get them to say it themselves. So in a typical class with Lizette, she'll have students collaborating in small groups. They're working on rich tasks. And Lizette will quietly circulate, checking in as necessary. I've learned so many great eavesdropping strategies from her, like, when you're walking over by a group and kind of like listening in, but not looking directly at them because you don't want them to be like, oh no, she's noticed me. But like kind of listening in, and she'll intervene and give some scaffolds and supports as necessary. But she's always helping students find the answer themselves. And overall, there's just this like really happy buzz of mathematical thinking. When like the kids are working and they're talking about math, but they're also like joking and having fun with each other. And they like being there and you like being there. It just like feels really good. Like the vibes are just right. That's Lizette's class, most days. But what happens when things change? So in the second year of our study, Lizette's class suddenly got much bigger. She went from about 25 students to 41 students on the roster with 40 desks in the room, right? Just always a good feeling. So she's got 11 groups now instead of 6. And she's still like walking around, but it's no more like quiet observation and circulation. She's going from group to group to group, and she doesn't really have time to just like stop and listen. So with so many more students, there's just less of her to go around. And she's not stressed by this. She's not like frantically running around the room. It's just that she finishes talking with one group and then somebody else has a question. So she'll go over there and then go to the next group and the next group. And students are waiting a long time between like getting help and feedback and support from her. And so that happy buzz of mathematical thinking now has this like darker undercurrent of frustration that's simmering as like kids are having to wait longer. She hasn't changed her practice, but the class context has changed. She's still giving them rich tasks. She's still letting them work in groups. She's still focusing on letting students figure things out and not telling them procedures. Like, she's still doing the same stuff that she was before, but they're just not working as well in this new context because there are so many more kids in the room. And so that brought us to think about, like, well, how can we help her navigate this and negotiate this and like figure out what to do differently? She, in that moment, she felt like she was a bad teacher. And she said that. She was like, I am a bad teacher. I have done a bad job. It's like, no. That's not what happened. You're not a bad teacher. It's just that like things aren't fitting the context here. So I want to introduce this idea of pedagogical judgment, which is a different way to think about good teaching. That pushes us more towards that expansive view of like, what is this good for and why and how, and away from that binary view of like good teaching, bad teaching. Pedagogical judgment has 3 parts. The first part is action, right? Like, what do teachers do? We do all sorts of things. We give tests, we plan lessons, we respond to students, we decide like when we're gonna go small group, whole group, when we're gonna do direct instruction, or like elicit students' responses, have them share out. Like, we decide all of that stuff. We do a ton of things. But then there's also, like, underneath those actions, there are reasons. There's pedagogical reasoning for why we do this. So maybe we're gonna like really focus on like visual representations of fractions, because I know that next year that's gonna be really helpful for what they're doing in the next year or the next unit or whatever. Maybe we're focusing on having students work collaboratively in groups, because I know that that's a part of good teaching. And that's what I think is part of good teaching. Maybe we're following some administrative requirements that I need students to work independently for at least 20 minutes so that I can do some sort of like individual assessments with each kid. Or I need to do, I need to make sure that I have XYZ grades in the grade book because that's what my principal is expecting. So there are all sorts of like reasons that we'll do these things. And then most importantly, there's the pedagogical responsibility. The like core commitments that we are beholden to, that we are obligated to follow. Some of that is personal, like our sense of ethics and morals, our sense of justice, our need to keep kids safe in the room. Some of it is logistics, right? Like, well, I gotta give the kids something to do independently so that I can pull them out to like do whatever individual assessment, or I need to get these assignments out so that like I can send them home for parents or whatever. Like, there are logistical things that we have to deal with. And then there's also the legal compliance, right? Like all of the legal things that we have to do as teachers. So we have like these core responsibilities that should be driving all the rest of our actions and our reasoning. So I want you all to now discuss this in small groups and think about like just one example of arranging students in groups. we want to do group work in the class, what are some reasons that you might do that? And what sorts of pedagogical commitments or responsibilities does that reflect? Or might that reflect? Go ahead and talk amongst yourselves. I love like the internal teacher timer of like knowing exactly when 30 seconds has passed. All right, now I'd love to hear some of your examples. Like why would you put students in groups?
We said,
Hold on, I'll get the mic.
We said, and we know that this is the more reason we don't like to think about, but because our administrator said that's what they want to see when they come and observe a lesson. They want to see us having the students work in groups, and when we get evaluated, that's what we're going to be evaluated on. So,
Yep.
and that reflects our commitment to following the expectations that our administrators set for us.
And that's legit. That's a real thing that happens. Why else?
Another reason to put students in groups is to promote thinking on rich math tasks. And that would reflect a commitment to, there's that word again, randomization of groups to support thinking in the classroom.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we want kids to think about math. That's great.
Could you comment on the randomization idea? Sounds interesting.
Yeah, that's another great layer of grouping.
We have a fantastic math team at our district, and we're doing a book study, the title of which is The Orange Book. Mathematical, there we go, thinking classrooms, and I can't say her last name either, Liliadal, yeah, Peter.
Yeah.
Peter Liliadal. And so one of the practices that his research shows is that a randomized group is more likely to be doing thinking in a classroom than a homogeneous group or what we think is a planned group. I'll mix the high kids with the middle kids with the low kids. And the research shows that there is a slower time to respond, less commitment to being vulnerable in a group that is not randomized. A randomized group produces better results.
Well, and if you think about it, a random group, anyone can have smart ideas. But in a planned group, like a stratified group, where you put together like a high kid, a medium kid, and a low kid, the kids know who they are. We try to be sneaky about it, right? Like, oh, I'm just gonna like put this group together, and this is just a random group. But the kids know. They know if they're the high kid, the medium kid, or the low kid, and then they will play into that role in the group. Or if we do like homogeneous groups and we have like a high group, medium group, low group, they also know where they are in that hierarchy. But if it's random, then we don't have a hierarchy. And anyone can be the smart kid. Anyone can be a high kid.
Yeah, some things that, some ideas we generated online were ideas like group work helps build confidence and peer relationships, offers differentiation. Did I pronounce that right? Build deeper understanding of material, build confidence and being able to explain it to others. It provides opportunity and is essential for students to talk through the problems and see different ways of thinking, but there is a need for individual accountability as well.
And so there are so many reasons that we might do any particular pedagogical action. Turn this off. Maybe. No? Okay. Okay. Cool. So one reason we might put students in groups is that so they can collaborate, so they can, engage in rich tasks and learn how to like gain the confidence piece, all of that good stuff that y'all were saying. And that might reflect a responsibility that like collaboration is key for student sense making. That working together, learning from each other, those are important skills. Part of that might be mathematical, right? That like we're gonna learn things more deeply when we talk about it with each other. Part of that might also be more social and like developmental, that kids become like better people, better citizens and like members of a community when they're able to collaborate with one another and when they learn how to work with people who are different from them. We might also arrange students in groups so that kids can help each other, right? On more or less like independent work, but so that kids can turn to somebody else to like check their answers or to get an explanation. And that might free up your time as the teacher to like target specific students or to take care of some other tasks in the classroom, as students can like depend on one another. That's another reason that we might arrange students in groups. And the logistic stuff is non-trivial, right? It might be that that's what the admin expects. It might also be that it's easier to move around the room or easier to pass out materials. You know, we can just like keep a bunch of pencils and erasers and calculators and markers or whatever in bins on students' desks, and then you don't have to like worry about passing them out. Those logistics matter, and that frees up your time to spend more time on instruction and less time on passing stuff out. Or it frees up your time to spend more time teaching and less time talking with your principal about what they expect you to do. Right? So like those logistics are real. There are two big ideas that I want to pull out of this. One is that this concept that any action can have a lot of different reasons, and those reasons matter. Two is that teachers are constantly balancing a bunch of different and maybe competing responsibilities. So like back to group work, maybe we think that like collaboration is key for student sense making, but maybe it's hard to come up with a way to hold individual students accountable for that work. And so we also want to hold students accountable for individual like products, but it's harder to get at that with group work. That's not like an insurmountable conflict, but those might be two things that you're trying to balance. Or maybe the admin wants to see collaboration in the room, but this group of students, like the personalities, the dynamics, the like maturity, like it's just not gelling, it's not working, the vibes are off, and they don't know how to collaborate together yet. And so that is getting in the way of some other goals for learning and development and teaching. And so as teachers, we're constantly balancing all of these different competing things. And I think that's true now, maybe more than ever. And so we have to like grapple with that and figure out what is it that we are going to hold ourselves accountable? What do we want to stay true to? What do we need to do as teachers for ourselves and for our students? And so I want you to turn back to your small groups again, and discuss like what are your core commitments and your pedagogical responsibilities? Who are you as a teacher? Because this really gets at the heart of teaching. I want you to talk about this one first, but then where this is going to go, just so you know where we're headed. I'm going to ask like what pedagogical actions support or conflict with those responsibilities, and to really think about like how you can stay true to your goals and commitments. Okay, but first, turn and talk amongst yourselves, chatting about this first question. All right, now I want to hear from you all. Like, what are some of the things that you're grappling with? What are some of like your core commitments, and what actions are supporting that, or maybe conflicting with? Or just like, what were y'all talking about? I can hear snippets.
Look, I've already spoken twice, but. So we brought up a lot, but every time we would bring up a core commitment, something that we noticed together is it's hard to bring up core commitments and pedagogical responsibilities without also bringing up all the things that conflict with those commitments. And we said that the act of being a good teacher is when you kind of reconcile with that, where you try to figure out, how do I take what I know to be best practice? How do I take what I know to be my commitments? And how do I fulfill those while also meeting these demands and these demands? And so that was just the big thing, is when we started talking about the core commitments, we immediately got into the second question, because it's really hard to talk about one without also bringing up the other.
Yeah, yeah. And that's part of what makes teaching hard, especially now, when there are so many people telling teachers what to do. And they're saying completely different things in most cases. So it's really about figuring out, what do you care about? What is most important? You have pedagogical expertise. You know your students. You know them far better than I do, and far better than probably anybody else. So it's like up to teachers to figure out what they need and to make those hard choices. What else were y'all talking about?
No, so one of the things that that Hank was saying is that he values bringing the core commitment is making the learning of the tests relevant to students' lives so that they can see themselves. Did I get that right? That they can see themselves in the math, and then that made me think of, I know there's one of the conflicts is our particular curriculum, and I was thinking about at the 5th grade level, there's a particular task later in the year where it has the students, they have to, have this business, and it gives the business as a record store. We don't have really records anymore, and so, right. So, so could you change that? Absolutely. But then, what are the conflicts? And you might get administrative conflict. You with communication, that could be eliminated, but also time, because all those materials for the record store have already been created by the curricular materials, and you would have to somehow recreate all that with whatever business or entity that, if you had your students choose something. So time becomes a constraint too.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you have to, part of our pedagogical commitments is not burning out and not spending all day, every day working. We can't do that.
Yeah, I can share some from the online group. And I think some follows from the themes from the previous groups. One reoccurring theme was this idea of fun and engaging, fun lessons, fun and safe place to try new things, and discourse and conversation with their students. But then there's this conflict of trying to fit so much in that, can we dig deep enough with the concept, right? Or feeling the need to be scripted rather than interactive and exploratory, also kind of create these conflicts as well. And then also kind of in these pedagogies, like working in small groups, is the conflict of the small groups not working out, or the students not knowing how to lead or participate or engage in the way that we may have kind of envisioned or imagined.
Yeah. And for any of these dilemmas, there's not one right answer. Someone in the secondary group said on the way out, he was like, I gave one piece of feedback. I wish you would have told us the answers. I was like, I don't have the answers. There's no answer key in the back of the book on how to teach. Yes, yeah. For any best practice, your mileage may vary, absolutely. And it's constantly depending on who you are, who your kids are, what you care about, what else you're being asked to do. And trying to figure out, where is there some give and take? How do you negotiate those things? I think a lot of the teachers that I work with right now feel like they're kind of going crazy. They're being pulled in so many different directions and being asked to do so many different things, with students who are also stressed out. And the students are, the kids are not okay. The teachers are not okay. We've been through a lot these last few years. And so just trying to deal with all of that while also teaching and also helping kids be okay and grow and develop as humans, even in these weird pandemic times that we're living in. it's really hard. And like, yeah, it is. And I think the only way to get through it is to really like think about, what do we care most about? What are our non-negotiables? What are our core commitments as teachers? And how do we stay true to that, even amidst all the like chaos that's happening around us? What other like thoughts or concerns or like questions do y'all have? Go for it.
So when I was in my undergraduate, I've been teaching, this is my 4th year now, and when I was in my undergraduate, I was told a lot, you know, use your professional judgment, use your professional judgment. And I said, what professional judgment? I said, I've had exactly 0 years of teaching experience. I guess my question would be to those new teachers and people who are currently studying in their undergraduate, what advice do you have to them when it comes to using their professional judgment and their pedagogical judgment in the classroom? Because they don't have the years of experience and all the mistakes that everyone else has made to learn from. So what would you recommend?
So I would recommend thinking about like the strengths and the knowledge and expertise that you do bring to the classroom. I teach a lot of pre-service teachers. They're student teaching right now. You know, it's February. They've been in the classroom since August. They know way more about what is happening in schools right now than I do, just like from being there every day or 3 times a week. They know a lot more about their kids and like where their kids are, what kind of number sense they have, what kind of strategies they use, what kind of stuff they like. How they think, what they're interested in, what's fun or funny to them. They know so much more just by hanging out in the classroom 3 times a week for, I don't know, 6 months, however long it's been. They know way more than I do about that. They also know about their own experiences in the classroom as students. Many of them at the beginning of the year tell me that they, you know, in 3rd grade, Miss So-and-so gave them math minutes about times tables, and they liked math before that, like in 1st and 2nd grade, and then in 3rd grade, they had the math minutes, and then they were like, oh, I'm just not a math person anymore. I had so much anxiety from doing those math minutes, and that's how I learned that I wasn't fast enough, wasn't accurate enough. Studied at night with my parents, but then we were crying over the dinner table, like refreshing flashcards on multiplication tables. That's a valuable experience to know that they don't want to replicate that. They don't want to like pass those negative experiences on to their students. And so they know from that experience, like, I want to help students become math people. I want to help them like math. Or at least I don't want to like make them feel as bad as I felt, right? And those experiences matter. Or some of them had a really great teacher who like helped inspire them and encourage them to like plan their own business or do something really fun and exciting. And they can replicate those things too. We always have to take that with a grain of salt, right? Like just by virtue of being teachers, we're a little bit weird. We are not like necessarily representative of the children in our rooms. But we can think about and reflect on what are those experiences that are and are not supportive of student learning.
You know, a couple thoughts is I think for like early career teachers, I think in any generation of teacher, there's some type of extrinsic piece to it, right? Like, so even in the early 90s when I was teaching, my administrator came and observed me and had this checklist that they filled out, right? And we always go through these iterations until I feel like in the teaching profession, we grow to a sense of autonomy. And I think what I appreciate about this talk, I kind of, to paraphrase, it's like mindsets for teachers, right? Because it's this space to say, you know what, it's not binary, it's not right or wrong, it's kind of reclaiming that kind of autonomy and space to make decisions. And so, for me, as I kind of think about it, it's I kind of really liked the kind of the frameworks and the questions, because it's not about a right answer, but it's about a reframing and kind of being true to yourself.
Exactly. We also have to play the long game. I tell this to my pre-service and early career teachers all the time. You have to play the long game. If you want to become a really good teacher, it's going to take time to develop that expertise. You're not going to have it all figured out in your first year, or your second year, or your 10th year. And so if we're not playing the long game and thinking about, all right, I can change some things right now, but I can't change everything right now. That takes a lot of the pressure off of any individual teacher to have it all figured out today, this year, for these students. You're not going to break your kids if you do some things that you don't wholly agree with, or don't wholly reflect your pedagogical commitments. You can change some things now and keep figuring out other stuff to get better and better over time. And I think that's part of how we live with, that's part of how we live with those actions that we have to follow through with to meet some sort of institutional requirement that maybe doesn't align with what we care most about. But if that's not a fight you can fight right now, then don't. Maybe that's a fight for later, but you have to figure out, how do we deal with it now? For Lizette, all right, I'll wrap it up with this. For Lizette, she had 40 students, she had too many kids in the room. Objectively, too many children in an AP calculus class. Too much. That was not a thing that she could deal with in that moment, right then. She could go talk to the administrators about changing the policies for how they schedule classes, but that wasn't gonna fix the kids that were coming in her room tomorrow. And so we have to think of, that's not a fight to fight right now, the too many kids in the room. What is a fight to fight is how do I deal with the fact that I have too many kids in the room? What strategies can I use to keep them thinking mathematically, but also support them and stay sane as just one teacher with too many kids? That's how we have to think about it. All right. Thank you all so much. This was wonderful to come talk with you. That's time. Yeah, thanks.